Well, today is the inaugural meeting of the Louisiana STEM Initiative, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, and the idea is to create a plan for more individuals, primarily young women, but all individuals, to get into those fields where there are a lot of high-paying, highly professional jobs in the state. Senator Hewitt, who is a mechanical engineer by profession, and she's also a senator, began to ask, why is it that we're not getting the types of people ready for the jobs that the state has? And she began to look at it and recognize the pipeline all the way from K through 12 through college was not sufficient to meet the demand. So she felt a group such as this would help.
Amazon has recently publicly announced that they're going to have a second headquarters, and they're starting a bidding war basically with all of the states. So they, of course, will be looking for incentives and other things. And they have a few requirements in terms of where they'll locate, but they're talking about 50,000 jobs at an average salary of $100,000 per person. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for any city or for any state to lure a company like Amazon into their state. But the big thing that they're looking for is STEM talent. And the reason they're leaving this, not leaving, but the reason they're not expanding in the Seattle area where they're currently headquartered is because there's not enough STEM talent and there's too much competition. So this is just one company of many companies that will be looking for STEM talent, and it's not always just going to be in the traditional fields that you think. In Louisiana, we're blessed with many high-tech companies already, with the oil and gas industry and petrochemical and the LNG and the maritime industry, cybersecurity. We have lots of needs for high-tech. We have the space industry over in southeast Louisiana. We have many opportunities for high-tech industries, and I believe if you have STEM talent, you're going to encourage additional industries to come to the state of Louisiana.
What we call high-wage, high-demand jobs in this state. In other words, these are the types of jobs people aspire to, $80,000 to $100,000, and about 42% of them will require a STEM background, if not maybe closer to 50%. And the second thing we looked at is how many students graduating from high school are ready to enter those fields, and it's only about 10%. So if you take 10% of students who are ready to enter those fields, about 50% of jobs, high wage, high demand, and then overall all jobs, about 42% of them require some STEM. There's a gap out there we have to fill.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rollo, for giving me an opportunity to officially kick off this journey. And I want to start by saying how excited I am to see so many of you here, and I appreciate the commitment that you all have shown in helping us resource this activity. You know, I believe that today is going to go down in history as a turning point for the state of Louisiana. Because today is the day that we're going to make a decision to take concrete steps to making Louisiana an international leader in the area of STEM. Today's the day that that's going to happen. And you all are going to be part of that. In doing so, we're going to provide an opportunity for the citizens of Louisiana to get the skills they need to get high-paying jobs in the area of STEM. And we're also going to build the engine that the state of Louisiana needs long-term for economic stability. And although we can't discount the importance of art and the other programs in helping to make our community more well-rounded, I think we would be remiss in not recognizing how technology is changing all around us. And it is so integrated in our everyday lives that we would be missing a tremendous opportunity if we didn't take advantage and participate in the changing technology. This is not going to be easy. And as Dr. Rollo mentioned, you know, we have an interesting cast of characters as part of this group. And it was very strategic in that half of you represent parts of the education area, and the other half represents industry. And because I see this as a very equal partnership. And what you're going to find, even though many of you, it has been pointed out to me, some of you maybe don't necessarily always agree on issues, and you might find yourselves normally on opposite sides of some of these issues. STEM is the exception, Everyone loves STEM. STEM crosses all demographics, all political boundaries, because I believe STEM represents hope, and it represents opportunity, and it's something that everybody loves. It probably was the most bipartisan bill that we passed in this last session. Many of you are already partnering in great STEM activities happening around the state, and I don't want to discount any of the work that you're already doing. And part of what you're going to hear about today is our objective is to learn about all the great things happening already in the area of STEM and to figure out those things that we want to expand upon and maybe take statewide. The partnerships are already happening between industry and education, and they're critical. I mean, I see industry as the ultimate stakeholder. Industry, you are the ones that are providing the jobs and are driving the economy and are providing money, basically, to allow our families to prosper. Funding is going to be an important part of this initiative. And as we gain more clarity on the direction that this council chooses to go, we are going to be depending initially on funding from industry to help us get focused until we are sustainable enough and can demonstrate some results to be able to seek state funding. Now, I'd like to give a shout out, and for those of you who have read the bill already, you know that part of the bill discusses an interest in increasing the number of women in STEM. And there's a lot of talk in the country about equal pay. And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about that. The statistic that quite often gets quoted says in Louisiana that women get paid 65% of what a man gets paid. The distinction that you need to have with that particular statistic is that that is not talking about equal pay for equal work, that particular statistic from the AAUW. What that statistic quotes is the median male earner in Louisiana compared to the median female earner in Louisiana, where the woman makes 65% of what the man makes. So as you math teachers know, and those of you with the technical backgrounds, you know that median means if you lined up all of the men from the highest paid to the lowest paid and selected the man standing in the middle of the line, and you did the same thing with the women, and you compared them, the female would be making 65% of what the male makes. So that is more a result, that disparity, in my opinion, and I think literature supports this, that disparity is more a result of the careers that women have chosen, more so than the fact you're not comparing, again, equal pay and equal work. So the careers that women are choosing in most cases are not in those high-paying fields like STEM that we're talking about. And so I firmly believe that STEM and a focus on STEM for women is a way to close the pay gap. And so that is the driver for me in focusing and trying to provide some extra emphasis for women in STEM. Many of you know my background, and you know that I'm a mechanical engineer by background. I started out my first year on a drilling rig back in the early 80s when women really were not very prevalent in the drilling industry. And so times were tough. And every now and then I get conned into telling some of the stories about back in the day, how things were. And like many of you, I juggled how to balance work and family. And as I kind of earned my stripes, I think, and built some credibility with that group and became very successful in executive management with that company, I began to learn the value of STEM. And I felt like, and I believe that many women feel this way, that I did not want to be given anything other than an opportunity to be treated fairly and to be judged based on my performance. And so I believe that women around the state and around the country feel that way too. And we just need to be able to give them hope, and we need to show leadership and mentorship. And so I'm kind of sending out a little bit of an all call here for female leaders around the state I believe you will have a role in this process in mentoring and being a role model for young girls to show them that women can be successful in the area of STEM.
Just two quick little stories just to put it in perspective. I think oftentimes we are informed by our own life experiences, and many of you may know that I spent probably about 30 years in the military, and I'll give you two examples. We were in the middle of nowhere, and one of my enlisted non-commissioned officers came up to me and he said, "Sir, you know, 20 years ago, I'd be stringing wire here for communications, and all you needed really was a strong back and a good work ethic." And he said, "Now I've got to link up with the satellites, I've got to worry about angles, I've got to take math that I never even knew existed." And here was a man with a high school education, but at the same time was engaged in the types of activities that are defining the future. My own background, I was in the intelligence field, and I remember in 1981 when I was commissioned in the Navy, I had a number 2 pencil. That was my high-tech device to begin to develop plans for pilots to avoid certain parts of the airspace that they shouldn't be in. And when I retired in 2008 as a colonel, I was taken to a facility and I was looking real-time with drones over places in the desert, allowing linguists to interact with technology people, to interact with pilots. So technology is with us. And let me make a couple of observations and then we'll go to the agenda. The first is that STEM represents constant change. I mean, that is a given. It is going to change, it's continuing to change. And that leads to the second point, is that if we don't engage in this activity, the world is not going to stop and wait for Louisiana to catch up. And even if we do engage in this activity, everyone around us is doing so at the same pace or perhaps even better, or even faster. We live in an extraordinarily competitive environment. There are good things at the end of it, but at the same time, we have to be competitive. And the third observation, when I taught international business, and one of the things we always talk about is no borders. STEM represents no borders. There is no such thing as STEM for the regions or the parishes, or STEM for the state, or STEM for the nation, or STEM for the world. STEM basically captures everything, and we need to acknowledge that as we move forward. And I'm also a former business professor and business dean. I always like to start with a number, and the senator alluded to, but I want you to think about these two numbers as we begin to inform our conversations. The first is Dr. Barnes, who is our economist at LSU, Stephen Barnes, who does a great job, and he projects workforce, and he works with our workforce colleagues, et cetera. And this is for Louisiana. I'm not talking about outside of Louisiana or those strange places like where I came from, New York City, but I mean Louisiana. 4- and 5-star jobs, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. Those are high-wage, high-demand jobs, and this is not to diminish or to denigrate individuals who can't compete for those, but we're focusing on high-wage, high-demand jobs, 4- and 5-star jobs. 58% of those in Louisiana will require some background in STEM, and 40% of all jobs in our state will require some background in STEM. And as I was joking earlier, my undergraduate degree is in Russian history, and I grew up in a STEM-light household. We have to change those things. So the first number to think about is 58% and 40%. And then the second number, the senator alluded to, but we just got actually last week, on Wednesday, the latest ACT scores, and 10% of Louisiana graduates are currently ready to meet the STEM workforce needs. So you have 58%, you have 40%, and you have 10%. In any way of thinking about that, that is a gap analysis, and that's what this group is all about. Now, the nice thing is that there is, if you will, good news at the end of this process, but at the same time, we need to recognize, as I said before, it is a process that if we don't engage in it, not only are we going to be left behind, we're going to get run over. This is the committed group. These are the people from the private sector, from higher ed. Everyone has a vested interest in making these things work. But what I really took away was this is the first time they've all come together in the same room. And so we can have one conversation rather than 15 conversations and maybe make that one conversation meaningful.
Rising tide lifts all boats. So as people have higher paying jobs, you will have fewer people on Medicaid and programs that cost the state money, quite honestly, and it's going to help families. It's a win-win. STEM is something that everyone loves. It has bipartisan support across all demographics. Everyone can benefit from STEM, and everyone's really excited about this opportunity.
We are required in January to give a report on how we are moving forward, but more importantly, what we're trying to accomplish. And that really over the next 3 or 4 months, we're seeing what's out there in Louisiana. There are a lot of good things out in Louisiana, but at the same time, we're also recognizing the gaps. As I mentioned, one of the gaps having to do with insufficient numbers of students that are getting ready. So we will give to the legislature how we're going to fix it.
I am so excited about what I saw today. The LaSTEM Advisory Council is going to change the state of Louisiana, and we have put together a very high-powered group of 29 individuals that are equally as excited, and a tremendous staff with the Board of Regents that will help lead the effort, and so I expect great things to come from this.
If people have questions, like more information, what should they do?
Absolutely. Go to the Louisiana Board of Regents website, and there'll be a whole basically box on there with this Louisiana STEM. Pop on there, and they'll be more than happy to involve themselves.